Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast here by Agent of the Forecast, and this is going to be a different video. This is actually going to be a severe weather forecast. I'm going to be taking a little break on the overall winter coverage because we have a significant severe weather possibly or severe weather outbreak possible for this Wednesday on December 29th, and then we have another possibility for a severe weather outbreak in the very similar area as Wednesday, and that's going to be on New Year's Day and the second day of January. However, I'm going to be focusing just on the 29th for this video since we do have the Metascale models to help cover it, while we only have the long range models for the first and the second, and there's just a ton of disagreement between the models for the first. So I'm just going to be just taking a look on the 29th so I can have a long video just on Wednesday, as Wednesday does look rather concerning for portions of the lower Mississippi River Basin, as well for Dixie, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, and of course Mississippi. But before we get into the video, I would recommend you guys subscribe to the channel, especially if you want more coverage, whether it's winter, severe weather, etc. And then of course we'll have more details of severe weather in the spring. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So the first thing we'll be looking at is the actual storm prediction center day 3 outlook. It's going to be day 2 obviously tomorrow. But you're probably wondering, how am I going to be talking about something that's a slight risk, or only a slight risk? Well, it is a slight risk on day 3, and there is a very good possibility this will become an enhanced risk, whether it's driven by tornado or wind. However, there is a possibility that could very well be driven by tornado, because there is definitely a possibility for some spots across Mississippi and as well Alabama that could definitely have enhanced for the tornado-driven threats. However, right now it is a day 3, and it does include a pretty large radius as of now, including 6.3 million people, all the way from the Mississippi River Basin border between Louisiana and Arkansas, all the way up to portions of far northwestern Georgia, as well as lower Tennessee. It does include a large area of Mississippi and Alabama, so it's going to be the main area to watch out for along that warm sector. That's what we're going to be seeing possibilities for confluence bands, prefrontal confluence band, as well as some back to winds, at least from the mesoscale models as well. But the global models, like the European high resolution as well, the GFS, are obviously kind of just having towards veering in the surface. But overall, it's a pretty good setup. It does have a really great possibility to go to enhanced risk. It does include areas like Birmingham, Jackson, Huntsville, Chattanooga, and Tuscaloosa. And Tuscaloosa and areas like Jackson are definitely my main area to watch out for as well, toward the border of Alabama and Mississippi. And then a monitoring risk is pretty widespread as well, which is going to go all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, we're going to be seeing that really strong dew point and as well as strong moisture advection as that low jet picks it up. And since it's going to be a decent little jet with around 40 to 50 knots, it is going to take this moisture all the way as high or as far north as areas like Kentucky and Tennessee, as well as North Carolina. And that's where we do have a marginal risk for the probabilistic outlook. So here's the overall probabilistic. It is, let's see if it's going to load for us. It is a 15 non-sig. However, again, I do think this could very well have a possibility to go enhanced, possibly by the day 2 outlook. It does look pretty confident. However, again, we will have to see whether it can show and what other 18Z and eventually 0Z Metascale models show. But this, like I said, this include areas of Mississippi, Alabama, portions of Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana. But the main areas you really watch out for that discrete mode is across Mississippi and Alabama. We can go ahead and look at the overall kind of quick summary of this so you guys can get a brief overview of what we're looking at. So looking at stabilizers are capable for portions of the deep south into the southwestern Appalachians. We are going to be watching out for a mid-level shortwave trough, which will be from the central southern plains, and then Wednesday morning to the Great Lakes by early Thursday. The lead cyclone is expected to develop near the Oklahoma Panhandle and move east along the surface. Just going to be seeing a really strong little jet coming in from the Baja area, then it kind of getting picked up across that parent trough and kind of just taken into a slightly negative tilted trough shortwave, which is going to be moving its way towards portions of the Mississippi River Basin as well across the Dixie area. We're going to be seeing as well some convection maybe ongoing in the beginning of the period near the Red River across northeast Texas in that area. And then it will start to make its way towards portions of the mid Dixie areas like Mississippi and Alabama. We're going to be watching out for Some pretty good conditions. Gonna be looking at some mid 60s and dew points, which will present mid to late morning. Supercell wind profiles are expected across the entire warm sector with 50 to 65 knots of effective vertical shear. Therefore, this activity could be severe during the morning hours across portions of southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. So it's going to be developing in the morning across areas west of that Mississippi River, and then it'll obviously gradually make its way in towards areas east of that Mississippi River, and that's going to be that kind of mid-afternoon discrete mode, and then of course then it possibly become MCS overnight towards Alabama and Georgia and then Tennessee. So I'm going to be looking at the GFS just to compare with the RAP, the NAM, and the European high resolution. I'm not going to be looking at the GFS for much of the video since it again, why would we use a GFS when it's 3 days out? I mean, we could use a GFS to help compare, but at this point we really have to look at cams and those metal scale details. But here's the overall look at the latest 12Z GFS. So obviously we're going to be looking at for the 29th. So you can kind of be seeing an area of low pressure along the southwest here. That's where that low pressure is going to be set in place. And then you have that really strong 500 millibar mid-level low jet there. Really, really strong southwesterlies all the way from Baja. And there's going to be that area of low pressure, and then you're going to have that kind of main axis kind of focus around this. Oops, that's not it. You're going to be seeing kind of this main axis kind of right here stretching from that gyre across Canada. And we're going to be seeing some pretty strong shear already by practically tomorrow. We're going to be seeing around 85 to around 75 knots. And as we continue towards, obviously now, uh, practically in towards the morning of the 29th, here's the overall setup. You start to see again by the 29th, you see another that area of low pressure now across four corners. It's going to be a little bit less amplified as they were initially thought out to be a few days ago. But here's a look at 6C. You're going to be seeing that really slightly negative tilted trough. You can kind of tell once we go a little bit closer towards 12Z on the 29th, which is when these storms will start to really pop, or 12Z when these storms start to pop off. So if you kind of look at the overall orientation of this front, or of this overall little jet, here's the overall gyre right here, that main axis across Canada. And if you kind of just look at the overall ISO lines, you can kind of tell it is slightly negative tilted. So it is going to be slightly negative tilted. It is going to definitely be a yielding factor in this severe weather. So here's like a 12Z. You're going to be seeing that main little jet's going to be across the areas of the kind of upper Ozarks, as well across the upper portion of that kind of Ohio River Valley. It's going to kind of be a little bit to the north of that main area. So what's going to be the factor to that severe weather being down here? Well, first off, the thermo is going to be really, really good. And actually, the kitted max won't even be that shabby. So here you look at 12Z. Gonna be seeing, the discussion said, could see some severe weather starting off in the morning hours across northeast Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, and that's where we're gonna be seeing around anywhere from 55 to 65 knots of shear at 500 millibars by 15Z, and then eventually 18Z. Look how this jet starts to really amplify. Now gonna be seeing around 85 knots across the Oklahoma, Texas, and Missouri area. However, again, with the overall blob of dews, it's actually gonna get picked up by this low jet, and it's going to be picked up by the southwesterly, so this moisture will actually stay across Dixie and not go much further north in Oklahoma. As well, we're going to be seeing a really, really intense temperature gradient, so areas across Oklahoma, Texas, and Missouri are actually going to be seeing practically below freezing temperatures, as well as teens at some point in the 29th, so that's why we're not going to be seeing any severe weather there. But we're going to be seeing a kind of a ribbon flow, southwesterly flow from the cyclonic orientation across Dixie. Actually, this won't be too shabby. It's actually going to be around the mid 50s, even upper 50s. When you look at the overall 500 millibar, it's actually not going to be that shabby whatsoever. So it's really still really good December southwesterly orientation here. And then as we go towards 0Z, 21Z, and then eventually 0Z, then we have to watch out for this transitioning and severe weather across the northern Alabama, lower Tennessee, and as well northwestern Georgia. That's going to be mainly more of an MCS threat. However, again, we will still have to watch out the possibility if there is some good storm relativity, EHI, and decent forcing mechanism. We still could see some tornado possibilities along MCS. But here's something that's very interesting. We're going to be looking at the 850 millibar height. This is going to be kind of that main lower jet here. So as you look at, let's go towards the 29th in the morning. Okay, so here's the 29th in the morning. So you're gonna start to see by 9Z and then 12Z, you're gonna start seeing that kind of that closed low towards Kansas. And there's that little jet 850 millibars around 40 to around just under 50 knots across portions of Texas. Could see in some cases up to 49, but it's going to be just under 50. But as we now go towards 15Z, it's going to start to really amplify. But notice how that closed low pressure is going to be actually towards the Kansas area, and that main lower jet at 850 is going to be kind of north, just north of that severe weather, because obviously we're going to be watching out for this general area right here. But notice how by 18Z we start to see a second lower jet. This is again the GFS. You see a second lower jet starting to develop at 850, and it's going to be that southern ribbon flow down here from, of course, that main drop of 500 millibar. And this is going to bring in the shear we're going to be needing. So it's not going to be too crazy. However, it is going to be just what we need. However, again, the NAM and the rep are a little bit more intense than the GFS, but getting that 30 to 40 knot at 850 millibar by 18Z, and then it amplifies a little bit by 21Z and 0Z. I'm going to be seeing around 40-ish 850 millibar. At that point, it's going to kind of connect as one large area of 850 millibar flow. And again, that's gonna be all right. It's not gonna be anything too crazy, nor I'd say kind of like 1210 crazy when it comes to the jet. But it is what's there, what's needed criteria wise. It's gonna be there. But I'm gonna move my screen a little bit further up so you guys can see the soundings that I'm gonna pull up eventually. So let's now look at the overall moisture return on the GFS. So actually, it's not too shabby. You do see that big blob of really, really good thermos around 73, 70, getting close to 74-degree dew points. And that's going to be because we're going to be seeing a really large area of high pressure kind of staying across the Caribbean. And as this high pressure kind of pushes west, it's going to just keep that moisture kind of in place, waiting for that little jet to pick it up. So by now, at this point, by 9Z and then 12Z, we're going to start seeing the dew points and the lower 60s across Texas. Not too crazy. That's why we only have a marginal there. Even though that shear is going to be really, really in place. But again, the overall temperatures aren't going to be too, or the thermals won't necessarily be too conducive. But as you go towards the closer to the river basin, that's going to be seeing a lot better conditions. By 12Z, you're going to be seeing around 68-degree dew points, and then widespread mid to upper 60s by Mississippi. Now we look at 15Z and eventually 18Z. This is going to be the main area to really watch out. So notice how there's not going to be really backed winds forecasted. So we don't have any we're not looking at any kind of obvious confluence bands on the GFS. However, in last night's runs, we did see some pretty obvious confluence bands being forecasted. But if we look at 18Z, you're going to look at really anywhere across this general area. It's going to be the main area to watch out for. Or actually, that's a big circle. I don't want to do that. It's kind of anywhere around right here, around 18Z. We're going to kind of look at a sounding. So obviously, this is the GFS. We're not going to be seeing the best soundings. However, we are going to be seeing some noticeably okay soundings. You're going to be seeing decent photographs as well. Really good thermals are there. We're going to be seeing temperatures in the 70s, of course, with dew points in the mid to upper 60s, and for some reason it's taking a while to load here. But this is a decent sounding. Again, we do actually have 700 mixed layer cake, which is not. I mean, it's definitely alright. Definitely a decent, a slight amount of instability, and then we're gonna be seeing 1400 cape as well. We are gonna be seeing a decent amount of EML across the around 700 millibar. So we're gonna be seeing a chance for these lapse rates to continue to increase. So we could definitely see the possibility of some slight hail. But again, this is not the best sounding. Notice how we're going to be seeing some really weak shear at the lower levels. But initially, then as we go to the upper levels, it will really increase into the 70s. But at this point, this sounding's all right. We do actually have some backing here. We do have some southwesterly. So this sounding actually does have some backing, since we do have those. Actually, never mind. This is not backing. I don't know why I thought southwesterly. Sorry, this is veering. I didn't mean to say backing. Let's see. If we have veering here, backing would be southeasterlies, not southwesterlies. But we now look a little bit towards that portion of the kind of just along that kind of the upper part of that warm sector across the portion of north central or centralish Mississippi. We're gonna be seeing a little bit better soundings, especially with a decent decent hodograph. However, it's not really large considering the weak shear. We are gonna be seeing that lower surface. But again, like I said, this is the GFS. We're not going to be seeing anything really crazy. But once you look at the NAM, you'll start to see a little bit more metal details, obviously, and a lot more enhanced worthy. But the GFS really isn't too crazy necessarily, as long as it has that decent negative tilt and as well that moisture returns. All we really need to see. But we now look at the overall European high resolution. This one is has had a little issue with this cold front kind of dipping a little bit too far south, considering the timing of this convection. But if we look at 6Z, there is the overall trough. Definitely not as amplified just yet, but as you go a little bit later now by 12Z, look at this. That can be seeing definitely a decent negative tilt towards this. There's that really main 500 millibar flow. And then just like the GFS, that 850 millibar flow will be further south towards that main area. But there's the main area to really watch out for, just to the south of that main little jet. Going to be seeing some 40s, and then in the other areas where we have that margin, I'm going to be seeing some 60s as we go to 18Z, though. Now we're going to start to see some upper 50s, getting close to 60 knots. And then as you go towards now 0Z, then we'll start to see that higher shear in the 60s actually along Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. So we would have to watch out for even areas near Georgia, along South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Huntsville. You guys definitely have to watch out for the possibility. I think that area is being slept on. I think we do have some decent conditions for possibly some embedded tornadoes and as well embedded supercells. But if we look at the over 850 millibar, very similar scenario to the GFS. We do have that kind of main. 850 millibar towards that close low right here in Kansas. But notice how there's going to be a kind of a second ribbon flow with some strong southwesterlies, actually, really strong southwesterlies. And this 850 millibar flow actually seems to be slightly stronger than the GFS. There you see actually getting some 44 knots at 850 millibar, 45 knots, right in the perfect area we're watching out for at that time, 18Z, across central Mississippi. And as we go towards now 0Z, look how strong this 850 millibar gets across Tennessee. So definitely watching out for the Tennessee and Alabama area. There is going to be a strong 850 millibar and 700 millibar blanket of shear, a vertical shear. However, in some cases, like the GFS, there is going to be unidirectional shear. So that will be favoring more towards MCS. But overall, there is going to be some really good shear at 700 millibar and 850 millibar. So we'll have to as well watch out for areas in Alabama and Tennessee, kind of those eastern edges of that slight risk. It would be exciting what those areas look like if there is an enhanced risk issue, what they'll look like. But 54 knots in these, well, in the upper 40s when it comes to 850 millibar flow across Alabama. So definitely be watching out as well by the getting closer to the overnight hours across those areas. And then, of course, eventually then it'll go across the Carolinas. Let's now see the overall European high resolution. This is, again, the 12Z actually just updated right now. If we look at the overall, the warm sector, it's actually not too shabby. It actually, again, starts really early off across the eastern Texas area. It's slightly more favorable along the areas in that eastern risk and that margin, or in that western risk and that marginal. We are going to be seeing some decent dew points along Shreveport area, Tyler, Texas, that general area. But again, still going to mainly be marginal worthy at that point. But there's that big blob actually getting 75-degree dew points, which is 2 degrees warmer than what the GFS is showing. So this big blob there, and this is actually going to allow for some really good thermos on the European high resolution. Actually having some really good thermos all along the Gulf Coast here. If we look at 18Z, you're gonna be seeing just areas near 69-degree dew points near Jackson, Mississippi. Definitely really good thermos, and this is actually a decent sounding. We have 1800 Cape, 800 mixed layer Cape. We do actually have some decent sorority at 200 between surface and 3 kilometer. As we do have an EML just between the 800 millibar area or maybe possibly 750 millibar area. We do have just kind of towards neutral southerlies practically, but it's just slightly to the northwest. And then we have pretty much, we are going to be at this point we're kind of seeing slightly veering with high. And then eventually as we go to the higher atmosphere, we're going to be seeing backing. And this is actually gonna have a really high equilibrium layer actually. So we are missing some really high ecotops with these discrete cells. Shear isn't much improved, however, it's slightly better as well as 1 kilometer and 6 kilometer wind bar orientation is a lot better than the GFS. But overall, it's a decent sounding. There is some decent forcing mechanisms. There is some really good thermals with this as well. With some really good cape. There's really not much cap to really worry about here. And of course, that EML and that 750 millibar is going to allow the opportunity for some development in those updrafts as well. You look at further on, closer to probably western Alabama near Tuscaloosa. We are going to be seeing some opportunities towards the kind of state line. Again, this is the European high resolution, so it's not going to be anything too crazy. But really watching out the areas towards, like I said, probably south central Mississippi are going to be the main areas to really watch out for some opportunities. And then we look now by 0Z towards Alabama. We're going to be seeing a few tornadoes, a few decent tornadoes. I think at that point there is going to be some cap being felt by 0Z. But again, the European does have a decent setup, but the overall soundings aren't the best here. They're really brief, decent soundings. But there is, like I said, by 0Z, there is going to be opportunities towards Alabama and Mississippi. Oh, sorry, Alabama and Tennessee. There is going to be opportunities. I just ran into a really good sounding near the northeastern portion of Alabama. Yeah, this is actually a decent sounding here. There is very weak and really low cape here. Very I don't know how to say. There's really not much forcing here, except there is really a high storm felicity in the 300s at between surface and as well 3 kilometers as well. There is gonna be seeing the opportunity for unidirectional shear though. So that's gonna be the one thing you can kind of tell. There's really weak directional shear, but really strong speed shear. So that would lead to unidirectional. But look how enlarged this photograph is actually. We are gonna be seeing 45 knots at 3 kilometers. So this is a really enlarged, veered photograph. So this is definitely pretty interesting to see across northern Alabama. If we look closer to Birmingham, we are going to be seeing a similar scenario here. 500 mixed layer cape, which is all right. I mean, it's not going to be. I mean, it's kind of right to the point where it's a little bit too little. But that's where sort of stability is really high as well. That kind of that lower atmosphere shear is definitely being felt there. 43 knots at 3 kilometers, and then you see 59 knots at 6 kilometers, and then you get 74 knots at 8 kilometers. So there is gonna be a lot better shear in these areas. Like I said, 850 millibars is gonna really amplify once you get towards D or Z, and that's why we had these enlarged photographs, especially for 3 kilometers. See how enlarged that is for the surface at 3 kilometers. So definitely very interesting scenario that could very well pan out. And then we look at northwestern Georgia. There is a possibility for some, again, marginal tornado threats. And but at this point, it is going to be kind of an embedded MCS scenario. But let's now get into the metal scale models now in the wrap. So here's like the wrap. This is the latest update. This is the 15Z, which goes 51 hours out. So here's the overall look now as we go towards the morning of the 29th. So here's a look at 4Z. You can kind of tell there is some slight negative tilt here, but it's not going to be like a really strong amplified negative tilt that we saw with December 10th. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more just slightly negative tilt. It's not going to be as amplified. However, that shear is going to be there. I mean, it's going to be there. There is going to be that negative tilt still, but it's definitely not as amplified. So this scenario isn't going to be like a moderate risk or high risk like we were talking about with December 10th. I mean, we are still going to be seeing enhanced worthy, but this is kind of going to be, like I said, a lower end compared to what we've seen so far this month across these areas, but it's going to be a little bit on the lower end, but it's still going to be rather significant, I say the least. But we go towards now 12Z. There is that little jet starting to really amplify, but there is that gyre right there across Canada. You can kind of just see that overall slight negative tilt along these ice lines right here. That's really slight negative tilt, but there you see there's those strong southwesterlies coming in from this supposedly closed low across portion of the four corner states across, then going along the central plains And as we go towards now 14Z, 15Z, and then eventually 16Z, this is when this little jet starts to really amplify at this point. But notice how it's that main little jet at 500 millibar is going to be, like I said, across the Ozarks, across the portion of the Midwest. But we're going to be watching out for down here, where we're only compared to the main little jet, we are rather in the lower numbers at 48 knots. 51 knots, 53 knots. It's gonna be a little bit on the lower side. And that's where that 850 millibar little jet's gonna come in handy. But I did not go by 18Z, and it's where it stops 18Z. We're gonna be seeing a slightly higher number, 54 knots, 52 knots, in some cases 56 knots. And that's really all we need, 56 knots. I mean, that's not shabby whatsoever, considering it's December. So this is actually not too shabby of a setup. The wrap is definitely having it slightly more amplified. For the areas across the Mississippi River Basin than the global model. But let's now go ahead and get a look here at the 850 millibar. This is as well going to be pretty much like a very similar global model approach, where you're going to be seeing that agreement where there is going to be that second ribbon flow to the south of that main closed axis, which is going to be again in Mississippi, or not Mississippi, sorry, across Kansas and the areas of the plains. So let me go ahead and show you guys what I'm talking about. So here's a look at kind of 3Z, 5Z, 6Z. So there you start to see that main 850 millibar is going to start to kind of form right here across Oklahoma, Kansas, the Ozarks. And then you start to see that second kind of ribbon float 850 millibar. This is very similar to the European high resolution, where you see that separate ribbon float from that cyclonic orientation. That's we're going to be seeing my 18Z, really a decent 850 millibar flow, going to be seeing around the lower 40s across southwestern Mississippi, with some portions of eastern Kansas, or not Kansas, sorry, eastern Louisiana. But there where that low pressure is, that's where you're going to be seeing that this is going to be the main axis right here of that 850 millibar. But a little bit south of that axis, where you have that second flow right here, that second set of the little jet, that's where you're going to be seeing that favorable conditions in the 850 millibar for this severe weather. So now we're going to start getting a little bit more detailed into the Cape values, into the EHI, into all that stuff now that we're looking at the metal scale model. So let's go ahead and see what the wrap shows for the overall moisture on the in the 15Z. So as we now go towards the morning of the 29th, here's look at 7Z, 8Z, 10Z. You're going to be seeing 74-degree dew points all across the Gulf of Mexico, but really not too much going on here. Still seeing these upper 60s across Louisiana, Mississippi. And then as we go towards now 15 and 16Z, this is when we start to see this blob of moisture get picked up by the little jet as the little jet starts to amplify. And once that second set of 850 millibar sets up by around 15 to 16Z, this is where we're going to start seeing now this moisture return really increasing along the Gulf Coast. So now we're going to be seeing dew points in the actually 74, 73, and we're going to be seeing some really good conditions by 18Z along these areas across southeast and south central Mississippi. I mean, look at this one here, possibly closer towards the Hattiesburg area. We do have around 70-degree dew points. This is actually not shabby of a sounding here. Again, we're not going to be seeing anything too crazy with it when it comes to back to winds like we saw last night. But again, this is kind of these midday runs, which typically tend to underestimate systems or setups. But we are going to definitely be seeing some good soundings here along the Mississippi River area in this open warm sector. I mean, this is not too shabby of a sounding. There is some good cape there as well. Look at the mixed layer cape at around 1,100 and almost 1,100. SRH in the higher 100s. Shear is still going to be lacking those lower levels, so we're not going to be seeing those enlarged photographs. But as we now go towards as well, now let's look at towards the just western Alabama near the Mississippi River. This is actually a really good sounding here, actually. Although sounding large, you do see that kind of really good motion, that west motion at around 40 knots to the east, as we're going to be seeing kind of some higher shear values along the 6 kilometers and 8 kilometers. There you can kind of see that that 9 kilometer to 15 kilometer there, it's kind of decently strong shear. But 1300 surface cape, mixed layer capes a little lower at nearly 800. And there you see kind of that veering with height here. But let's now look a little bit closer towards the areas near let's say near the border right down here. Let's see what we have here. I mean, really good dew points and good thermos, and this is again a decent sounding as well. I mean, these are not bad soundings considering we are gonna be seeing kind of a lackluster shear. But there's still gonna be that vertical shear. There is still gonna be that discrete mode. There's still gonna be that perpendicular orientation of that front end, that that wind vectors. But this is actually a decent sounding here as well. This is actually slightly better when it comes to the overall thermos. So we're gonna be seeing around 2,000 cape. We're gonna be seeing around 1,000 mixed layer cape, which is not bad whatsoever. It's actually pretty good. Look at the LCL, really low, around 260 meters at surface. So this is gonna be really saturated. So it's gonna definitely be on the plus side with a severe weather setup. Uh, but again, we're not gonna be seeing those crazy and large HOTAs. But if we now go to 0Z, this actually I forgot we can go to 0Z here. This is the wrap, but we go now by 18Z closer to the Florence area in Alabama. We're still gonna be seeing those photographs that are gonna definitely be beard photographs as we now goes towards now. Let's go to southwestern Alabama. We haven't gone to southwestern Alabama so far. Southwest oh my gosh, southwest Alabama does look pretty good as well though. You're gonna be seeing really large cape around 1400 as well. We're gonna be seeing practically the LFC and LCL practically stacked on each other in those lower surface. So definitely, these are gonna be some really good elevated supercells. And then we go towards probably I'd say closer towards. Let's see if we go down here. What's going down here in southeastern Mississippi? We are also going to be seeing a very similar scenario with those stacked thermos. That veered photographs, 1500 cape, 1000 mixed layer cape, a slight EML there at around 700 millibar. So there is decent soundings on the wrap. Definitely a little bit better um than the NAM. I mean, I'm taking the NAM for last since that's kind of like at least so far I've seen the best soundings, the best setup so far. But let's now go ahead and get a look at the NAM. So this is the NAM. This is going to be looking at the 500 millibar height anomaly. So let's go ahead and get a look at what they have to say for this setup. So here's a look at 12Z. Here's a look at 12Z. Definitely already starting to see that amplify a little bit jet all across the whole basin here again. That main 500 millibar, 500. Oh my gosh, I cannot speak. That main 500 millibar is going to sit across portions of the plains in central U.S. while we're going to still see that kind of that lower ribbon flow with that cyclonic orientation. And then as we now go towards 18Z, now we're going to start seeing some better shear along the areas of Louisiana as well Mississippi. Going to get already around 58 knots here, as well some lower than mid 50s across the lower Mississippi River Basin. And by 21s, you can get some mid 50s as well as we'll eventually going to get into the upper 50s across Mississippi, Louisiana, as well could get some higher values by the 0Z across Alabama and as well lower Tennessee. But definitely still this is a little bit more of a obvious negative tilted trough. So there's that gyre. You can kind of tell this is a little bit more amplified to a negative tilted trough and shortwave. It's definitely looking like at least on this like a really ugly long wave, which is not what you really want to have with long waves. But these are still some really good negative tilted reads on the NAM and on the wrap, and there is some consistency between practically almost all the models for it being slightly negative tilted. If we now look at the 850 millibar on the NAMs, obviously going to be a lot more intense. So let's now look at the 15Z. So the 15Z, there's that main 850 millibar jets. It's a lot bigger of a difference actually for all the models. The NAM has the biggest difference between those two 850 millibar little jets. So there's that main one that closed low across Kansas. There's that main flow, but here's that second flow all the way down here. So there's actually a lot bigger of a gap between the two of them. And by 18Z, there's that main flow. There's that low pressure, closed low pressure. There's that overall axis down here. That's the main axis of that main 850 millibar flow. And there you see that kind of cyclonic orientation there, where the ISO lines are kind of trying to go around that area of low pressure. And then you have that second lower ribbon of flow down here. This will give me that second flow, that 850 millibar little jet, and it's gonna definitely bring in the severe weather. Gonna be seeing around these upper 30s and lower 40s, and then as we go towards 21Z, gonna start seeing these this 850 millibar start to kind of connect itself. So gonna be seeing now some 40s, and then it kind of starts to connect even more by 0Z. This is gonna allow for this second lower ribbon to actually amplify. So by Alabama and Tennessee, we could be seeing some mid 40s, and then by 3Z, it's gonna be some MCS. Nasty stuff that we don't really need to focus on. But let's now look at the overall moisture on the NAM 3 kilometer. Or sorry, this is not the NAM 3 kilometer. This is the NAM general, the regular NAM. So let's go out look at the moisture we're seeing here. So let's now go all the way up to the 29th. By 9Z, and then here look at 12Z, we're going to be seeing some rather decent dew points already. There's a big blob of 75, 74 degree dew points along the Gulf of Mexico, and as this little jet at 850 millibar starts to amplify and picks it up from the southwesterly to the northeast, we're going to be seeing some really good dew points by now 15Z. So we are going to be seeing by 15Z some opportunities for severe weather closer into Louisiana. That's where we're going to start seeing that late morning convection along Louisiana, before we are going to be watching out for possibly some prefrontal confluence bands moving by eastern Mississippi and then western Alabama. But this is a decent sounding. Again, it's going to be mainly going to be watching out for just some slight discrete mode along the river itself at 15Z. Possibly a just very semi-discrete, decent cape, the 1200 cape, 859 mixed layer cape. We're going to be seeing, again, still that really lackluster of that lower level vertical shear. But as we now go towards 18Z, we're going to start seeing a lot better dew points along the Mississippi River area. As we go to central Mississippi, really large worm sector, so we're going to be seeing some decent EMLs along the 700 millibar area, 1600 cape, 700 mixed-layer cape. Storm activity is actually a lot higher than the other models we checked out this time at 226 meters per second squared as well. We're going to be seeing some decent, not the best, but it's alright, 1 to 6 kilometer orientation, but definitely it's alright sounding. You can kind of see the overall, kind of turn to the northeast as you let a balloon out, and it kind of just gets taken by that shear. Practically due east storm motion, so it is going to be perpendicular to that, slightly perpendicular to that movement of that front itself. But if we now look at portions of Alabama, we are missing as well some pretty good soundings as well. There is going to be that EML across portions of Mississippi. We are going to be seeing some decent soundings along this area. Again, it's going to be a lower end threat, to say the least. I mean, there is a possibility it does go enhanced ribbon for tornadoes. I mean, this is actually not bad of a sounding here across central Mississippi. 1700 service cape, we are going to be seeing that EML just above 700 millibar. We are going to be seeing really some decent saturation along, look at that, 470 meter surface low. The shear is gonna be the one thing though. I mean, it's gonna be in the 30s across between 0 to 3 kilometers. That's why it's gonna be not too much of an enlarged photograph here. It's gonna be kind of bigger as well. But we do have kind of some neutral southerlies across Alabama here. So we are gonna be seeing some decent settings as well down there. But at that point, towards the lower southern half of Alabama, it's going to be kind of be seeing kind of more some semi-discrete storms. Not going to be seeing much of a tornado threat up down there. But if you go towards now the northern half of Alabama, that's where it's going to completely change. That's where we're going to be seeing by the 0Z, or sorry, 21Z, you're going to be seeing possibility for some confluence bands along the eastern or western Alabama areas. This is actually not bad. This is actually a really good sounding here. This is not bad whatsoever. Really, really low LCL. Gonna be seeing some. This is actually a really good wind sounding, as you have that inverted V sounding. But 1100 cape, almost 1200, 666 mixed layer cape. But this is actually a lot better sounding. Slightly, you can tell there's a lot stronger shear, or not a lot stronger, but there is gonna be stronger shear in these lower levels. You're gonna be seeing those 30s, 34, 33, and then 80 at the EL. So we're going to be seeing eventually slightly more enlarged soundings or photographs as you go slightly more into portions of Alabama. So we're gonna start to see slightly better conditions along those areas as we go now towards, let's see, east central Mississippi. We're also gonna be seeing some rather good sounding. This is actually a really good sounding here as well. So this is 1600, actually 1700 Cape, almost 1200 mixed layer Cape. This is actually a lot better sounding if you look at the thermos. Um, LCL is pretty low as well. We are gonna be seeing some good storage of helicity, but the shear is gonna be really, really. I mean, there's actually gonna be some really good backing with the sounding, so this is gonna be an interesting area to watch out for. Um, as you go back to now central Mississippi, this is also going to be an area to watch out for as well. Going to be seeing some better soundings. Once you go to 21C, that's where those better soundings are going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing over 1,000 mixed layer Cape, over around 1,700 surface base Cape, which is just enough for some good instability as well as some good forcing mechanisms. Yeah, we're going to start to see some better conditions uh, as you go towards the border of Mississippi and Alabama. Is going to be, I think, the main area to watch out for. South central Mississippi and as well portions of western Alabama are going to be the areas to watch out for. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video again. Definitely was a really long video, but try to give my best input on the severe weather. So definitely does have a possibility to go enhanced for a tornado, but as well there is definitely a apparent wind threat as well. So definitely gonna keep a very close eye on this. As of now, it's a slight risk, and it could most likely go to enhanced risk. But soundings like this, I mean, look at that 1600 mixed layer Cape. This is actually a really good sounding. So we're gonna have to really watch out for the south central Mississippi area and as well portions of Alabama. But hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys later.